A few days ago, my wife Sandra and I we're taking a walk, and we're having the conversation that I feel like everybody has been having lately, which is, out of everything that has been closed or postponed or canceled because of COVID-19, what do you miss the most? And this isn't a helpful conversation to have, right? Like, everyone knows this is not really going to make anybody feel better, but you just can't help but have the conversation sometimes. So we're talking about what we miss, and what just kind of fell out of my mouth without me even thinking about it was, I miss walking around the mall. And so, I'm not particularly proud of that answer, right? Because I'm supposed to be like a religious leader. So I'm supposed to only be interested in places that are kind of, spiritual. But that's the answer that I gave. I miss walking around the mall. And I stand by that answer because I do. I love malls. I spent a lot of my adolescence and young adulthood as a mall employee. And so even now, malls feel weirdly comforting to me. Right? Because a mall is so mass-produced. It's so impersonal, that they look basically the same no matter where you go. So I know that wherever I am, at least in this country, I can walk into a shopping mall and look around and think, I know where I am. I know how this place works. I know what these stores and restaurants sell. I probably even know the basic personality types of most of the people who work in these stores and restaurants, right? And that's really helpful when the rest of the world is confusing and difficult, right? Even if I don't know what tomorrow will bring, I know that I can go to the mall and go to Auntie Annie's and get a pretzel, and it will be better than the pretzels from Pretzel Time, and the guy who serves it to me will probably have a weird neck tattoo, right? It's about certainty. It's about stability. And so I've been missing malls lately, right? When things are so confusing and tough, and of course, the malls are closed, or at least should be closed, despite whatever misguided reopening plans might be going on. And so many of our beloved sources of hope and contentment have had to be shut down in the past couple of months, right? I'm thinking about concerts and cafes and parks and, different kinds of entertainment venues, not to mention, churches. But it's interesting to me to see, people are so intent on reopening everything. And part of that is because, people want their jobs back, of course, but I think people also want this because they want the opportunity to return to the places that they know and love and do the things that they know and love doing. And so I've been wondering about what this moment that we are in can offer us in terms of finding ways to reach a place of contentment within ourselves that is less dependent on things like location and circumstance, and has more to do with the ways in which we value ourselves. Right? There's nothing good about this pandemic, but there can be good things about our responses to it. There can be good in the meaningful work that we do on ourselves while we are staying in our houses. This can be a time when we make deeper connections with all that is beyond us, with our spiritual practices and with our families, and begin to build identities for ourselves and sources of meaning for ourselves that come from within, not from without. I'm thinking about this story that we read this morning by Thich Nhat Hanh, where he talks about a Buddhist nun that he knows who was imprisoned by her government for the justice work that she was doing. Thich Nhat Hanh describes how this woman was able to be free even as she was imprisoned and confined because she was able to breathe and meditate and engage with her spiritual practice. And she was able to teach the people around her to engage with that same practice. This is how she was able to resist despair. I think about this, and I think about the words of another great source of spiritual wisdom, the California ska punk band Operation Ivy, who once famously said, "To resist despair in this world is what it is to be free." The story about this imprisoned Buddhist nun is an extreme example, but her story does have something to teach us about our current situation, because this is a moment when all of us are being asked to build an identity and a practice that is largely independent from our ability to participate in what is going on in the outside world. And many of us are still trying to participate in the world and do what we can to stay connected, and that is a positive thing. There's nothing wrong with keeping ourselves informed and employed or with spending money. But this is a moment when we can reimagine the roles that those activities play in our lives. And we can begin to fill our lives with things that will ultimately be a more stable foundation for our spiritual and emotional health. And this is work that was already important for us to do. It just has taken on a deeper meaning now, right? Like, I will always tell you, just like in the Olivia Lang reading, I'll always tell you you should spend less time on Twitter. No matter how little time you already spend on Twitter, that's already a good idea. But now, in the situation that we're in, it just has a different level of urgency to it. And of course, this is much easier said than done. But, I've been brainstorming for these past few days and trying to think of some concrete steps that we can take to help us resist despair during this time, and perhaps reimagine our understanding of what it is to be content and at peace and free. So I've come up with a list of 3 things that I think, would at least be worth it for us to try. The first is to be kind to yourself and do what works for you. Look, I'm going to be totally real with you. Meditation does not work for me. I have tried and tried. I love the idea of meditation. I love reading about meditation. I love reading Buddhist texts like the one that we read as a part of this very service. But for me, my spiritual fulfillment comes from different places. My sense of fulfillment recently has come from getting up early every morning and taking long walks around my neighborhood with my wife and my dog. And also from, I've been doing some creative writing projects that I've promised myself that the congregation I serve will never see. Right now, I've just been sitting down and writing because I want to, and removing the pressure of ever having to preach it. It's been glorious. And I've also been buying a lot of stupid things online because, I want to support independent businesses, I guess, and also because I'm an American and I like buying stupid things online. Sandra and I were watching this program together on TV this past week called Graduate Together, where President Obama gave a commencement speech to all of America's graduating seniors, and he talked about the importance of doing what is right instead of just what feels good. And he was right to say that, and he was right to make the criticisms that he made. But because I'm a minister and not a politician, I also get to tell you that sometimes it is also okay and even good to do what feels good, right? Provided that what makes you feel good is not going to harm you or other people, right? It's still a bad idea to abuse alcohol and drugs or to spend days on end watching Netflix. But I think about how the Buddhist nun in our story felt best meditating. And all of us have different spiritual paths that we will walk to get us to a better place. This also feels like a good time to mention that just about every person who I've talked to in the past couple months has first told me how upset they are about the situation that we're in, and then immediately followed it up with, but of course, this is much worse for other people, and I get that, and I just have to be grateful for what I have and all that, and stop that. It is okay to feel how you are feeling, right? Perspective is always a good thing to have, but denying yourself the right to grieve will not make your grief go away. It will only make your grief less accessible to you, and then your grief will become much harder for you to manage. Part of being good to yourself is letting yourself grieve. We are all in a horrible situation, and your emotions about the situation are real, and they deserve to be seen and to be honored. The second thing that I'd encourage you to try is to make friends with reality, because we are in a situation that is so painful that it can be really tempting to just try and will it away. This is why, we have so many wild theories circulating online about what's really going on. Maybe this virus isn't real. Maybe this is a conspiracy. Maybe it's aliens. And I get it, right? It would be much easier if this wasn't real, right? The Buddhist nun that Thich Nhat Hanh describes would have had a much easier time if she wasn't really locked up by her government. Our work is to find joy and love and fulfillment in the world as it is now. Even if we may feel trapped and confined, there is always joy to be found if you're willing to look for it. To resist despair, to be free in the moment that we are in, is to stop defining hope as the belief that things will eventually get back to normal, and to redefine hope as being about getting to a place where our sense of identity and security is not tied up in the need for things to change, but has become solidified within us to the point where our hope is not dependent on when we will be able to go back to the barber shop again, but is based in a love and an acceptance of ourselves as we are, however we are. And number 3 is to make friends with the unknown. This week, a letter went out to most of the Unitarian Universalist community from the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who is the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And in this letter, she told Unitarian Universalist congregations that we should be prepared, and pay attention to that word, prepared. She said we should be prepared to continue to have our services online until about a year from now. And of course, the UU internet went absolutely bananas, and people started bellowing either about how this was clearly false and coronavirus will obviously be gone in a month, or about how this is clearly true and anybody who disagrees with this advice from the UUA is probably a Trump-supporting ignoramus. But everybody seemed to just latch on to the timeline that Susan presented as though it had been an ironclad timeline. But the thing is, Susan said prepare for another year without in-person services. She did not say that a year of worshiping online was definitely going to happen. And in fact, she said a whole bunch of times that there are so many unknowns and many things that could happen this year that could change the situation greatly. The nature of this crisis is such that it is very hard to know what will happen in the future, especially with so many unpredictable factors in play, like states reopening in different ways at different times, and politicians whose motivations are uncertain and ever-changing. We are still in a position where we know very, very little. As I keep saying, like a broken record, many very brilliant people have written articles insisting that this pandemic will end every single month between now and the end of time, because it feels much better to have an end date, even if that end date is heartbreakingly far away, because it gives us a sense of control, and it feels better to have control, right? I like walking around the mall because that's where I feel like I am in control, like I am in an environment where the rules make sense to me and I can predict what's going to happen next. But as Unitarian Universalists, it has always been our spiritual path to embrace the unknown and to lean into the idea that there is very, very little that we can be sure that we know and understand. I think about this Buddhist nun who, despite being of a different faith, can be an amazing role model for Unitarian Universalists in this time. Think of her sitting there in her cell, unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but doing her breathing and her meditation and working towards a sense of connectedness and satisfaction in the moment that she was in the place that she was in. Many of us come to this church on Sunday mornings when we're allowed to be in the building. We come here and we look out at this beautiful view of this beautiful river, and we are amazed by its vastness and its power. And we look at the river and we think about how limitless our world and our universe is, and how very little we know or control about all that is. Unitarian Universalism is a faith that has intentionally moved away from dogma that insists that it knows all the answers. Right? We believe that if there are any answers at all, they are probably not the same answers for everybody. Unitarian Universalist faith at its core is all about being present and grounded in a state of uncertainty and allowing that uncertainty to be what feeds and comforts us. So the theological challenge of the moment that we are in is at its heart a deeply Unitarian Universalist challenge. Unitarian Universalism is not about charting the river. It is about jumping into the river and allowing it to take you somewhere that you cannot predict. Amen.